This is True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time. Week by week, you'll hear the true stories behind the operations that have shaped the world we live in. You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position? I'm Rhiannon Neads, and this is True Spies from Spyscape Studios.
She could have left with the Polish armed forces. Many of the women did, but Zoe decided that she could most effectively serve her country by remaining inside Poland and helping to set up the fledgling Polish resistance.
Welcome to True Spies, Tradecraft, Part 1.
You could feel like this paper was almost burning a hole in his chest. Just the magnitude of the information that he was being given was pretty dramatic.
In this episode of True Spies, we're looking at some of the best examples of tradecraft to have graced our series this year. As regular listeners will know, tradecraft refers to the techniques, methods, and technologies used in espionage. So let's begin with something classic: gadgets.
We've all grown up on the James Bond films, or Fleming's novels. We love it. And I just assumed he had a really colourful imagination. But, when you start diving into the MI9 files, you think Ian Fleming has actually drawn on real-life events.
This is Helen Fry, an intelligence historian and author of MI9, A History of the Secret Service for Escape and Evasion in World War II. She was our guide in the True Spies doubleheader, MI9 Unmasked. We're all familiar with Q, the cantankerous quartermaster for James Bond's MI6, always handy with an invisible car or an exploding pen. But Helen let us in on a secret. He's not entirely fictional. But before we get to the real gadget man in question, some context. In 1939, Europe was at war. The British government knew that they would have to prepare to extract their people from behind enemy lines, so they established a new agency to do just that, MI9. They set up training courses for British airmen and soldiers, which would equip them with the skills they'd need to escape if they were captured or stranded. The lessons ranged from writing encoded letters from captivity to learning the best crossing points on the border from France into neutral Spain. But MI9 knew it needed to do more than just give out geography lessons. Allied fighters would need the best possible tools: maps, compasses, water bottles, and the rest, often in minuscule, easily disguised forms. So they formed a unit to devise and produce all of these contraptions. Its name? Q Branch. And the man at the head of it was an officer by the name of Christopher Clayton Hutton.
Clutty, as he was known, that was his nickname. He was a bit of a maverick who could think outside the box.
Clayton Hutton's brilliance shone through in the simplest of things. Take compasses.
The compasses, the army compasses in particular, are huge. They're heavy. They're going to be confiscated as soon as anyone's taken prisoner.
But Clutty came up with a solution.
Had manufactured these tiny compasses, which are really no bigger than a thumbnail. They're so tiny. And they were hidden in ordinary objects like the shaving brush or in the top button of the service personnel's uniform. Every serviceman and some of the women who went into action where they could be captured actually had a miniature compass in their top button.
And not only that,
Clutty realised, the Germans could find this. So what we're going to do is to access that, you unscrew the button the wrong way. I love that. MI9 did everything backwards. And the Germans didn't find those, and they were hidden in whatever we could hide them in. But to give you an idea of the scale of this, 1.4 million miniature compasses were made for MI9.
And the genius inventions kept on coming. Some of them were even quite stylish. Airmen were already given civilian clothes, so they could blend in if they were shot down. After all, you were hardly going to pass off as a local farmer while wearing an RAF jacket. But there was still one problem.
your boots are going to give you away.
Again, Clutty had an answer.
He created the Special Airman's boot, whereby you sort of detach the main part of the boot and then it looks like a civilian shoe.
And this shoe also had another function.
He would hide a garrote wire, for silent killing, hide that in a shoelace. Again, you wouldn't really detect this stuff.
Despite being tucked away in an underground bunker, Clutty's own work didn't come without risks.
He was experimenting with all kinds of things, and things went a bit pear-shaped when he accidentally blew up part of his shed/bunker.
Oh well, you know what they say. Nothing blown up, nothing gained. Of course, ideally, one should never need to resort to a concealed garrote. Violence, despite what the movies tell you, is actually pretty rare in the world of espionage. Far more intelligence is gathered through, well, chatting. Human intelligence. And our next guest is a master of the form.
I'm Neil Bisson. I'm a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service.
CSIS's exclusive focus on national security, counter-terrorism and the like means that, over the past couple of decades at least, many of its missions have taken place on dangerous territory, which makes the art of conversation difficult, but not impossible.
When I first started with the service, it was in the early 2000s, so we're talking just off of 9/11. So terrorism obviously was a huge issue for the service. We had basically gone from the point of the Cold War to domestic and international terrorism issues. So that was my main focus.
Before we hear about how Neil did his thing in these denied areas, we should make it clear that the details of this operation are a composite of several similar assignments. Canada's Official Secrets Act prevents Neil from getting too specific. Nonetheless, the details he shared give us an accurate representation of the human tradecraft that he and his colleagues employed during their various postings abroad.
For Operation Cover of Darkness, a team of CSIS officers have been sent to either a Middle Eastern or Southeast Asian country to connect with a individual who's involved in that country's military that is providing support and training to a terrorist organization. So we're looking at a country which involves itself in state-sponsored terrorism.
Officially, these CSIS officers are not here. That means no safe houses, no cushy secondary location in which to drink mint tea and talk shop. So the exchange of information between CSIS and their source has to happen quickly, on 4 wheels. A mobile debrief, in other words, which is where we join Neil. First, the source takes a circuitous route to the rendezvous. A CSIS team on the ground has eyes on him, checking to see if he's being followed. All being well, the source enters the car, especially chosen to be as inconspicuous a vehicle as possible.
Pleasantries are always exchanged.
In some cases, this relationship is long established, a catch-up between old friends.
Or it could be someone who's come up on the radar who has volunteered information and wants to speak to somebody about what's happening.
In the latter case, you're starting from scratch, building trust at 30 miles per hour. So comfort is key.
The source, of course, has enough room, is obviously air-conditioned, because when you're dealing with some of these countries, you don't want to be in a situation where you're so hot that you can't even have a conversation with someone.
Once everyone's settled, it's time to get down to the matter at hand.
And then from that point, you have the driver who has to ensure that pretty much a predetermined route that allows them to be outside of the eyes of most onlookers, which means you'll probably be headed out to more of a rural area. But again, you have to constantly be aware of potential checkpoints, potential dangers from IEDs in the road, abandoned vehicles, demonstrations, individuals who may possibly want to cause you harm.
Any one of these eventualities will bring a swift end to the briefing.
So while the driver is taking all of that in consideration, the handler is going through all of the information that the source has to provide in relationship to, in this case, the terrorist organization that's being funded and how it's being funded by that government.
The mobile briefing is a delicate art.
There's going to be the rapport building. There's going to be ensuring that the source, any concerns that they may have going forward or any concerns that they have about anything that's happened up until that point, any specific and important information that the source feels they need to share.
This requires a skilled handler, one who's able to get what they need quickly without losing their cool.
A debrief that would happen, let's say, in a hotel room or in a safe house, or it's a lot easier to make that more comfortable. You don't have to worry about what roads you're going to go down, how bumpy the ride's going to be. You're seated typically across from one another. You know, you can, depending on how long the debrief is, you can get up and move around. All of those things come off the table when you're doing a mobile brief. Depending on what background noise there is, what else is going on, it's easy to get distracted. And you're also dealing with a limited amount of time. Some debriefs, if you're, depending on the type of information that you're trying to get, could potentially go hours or days. But when you're dealing with this type of a situation, you have to be very succinct. You have to ensure that this is what I want to find out from you, this is what I want to tell you we need to work on the next time, and this is what we need to worry about.
This is a deeply abnormal situation. It takes someone special to put the source at ease.
So all of those things means that rapport can be affected in a negative way. Because essentially you're asking someone to jump into a moving vehicle, spew information that they have, take information that they need to for the next meeting, and then essentially get out of the vehicle and head home. And all of that has to happen typically within like an hour and a half.
No time at all, really. And in our anonymous CSIS vehicle, that time is coming to an end. Information, all being well, has been exchanged. Assurances have been made. CSIS and their source can think about next time.
And then the handler will provide tasking for the next meeting. So basically, this is what I want you to find out. I will be in contact within the next little while. If there's any emergency that you have that you need to contact me, this is how you contact me.
1955, Berlin. Work has just begun on one of the most audacious espionage projects in Cold War history. Operation Gold was a collaboration between the UK's Secret Intelligence Service, better known as MI6, and the CIA. The sheer size and initial success of the operation was a shining example of an element of tradecraft we don't usually associate with spies: large-scale engineering works.
They eventually come up with this idea of trying to tap into Soviet communication lines in Berlin. And Berlin is the ideal place for this because Berlin was the communication hub of Central Europe. And this goes back to pre-World War I days. It was just all the telephone communication lines. Everything was routed through Berlin. And also, Berlin was close to the Red Army headquarters for all their forces in Eastern Europe, which numbered over 400,000. So there's this huge Red Army presence in East Germany and Poland and Czechoslovakia, that the great fear was that Red Army could be set loose in a moment to cross over into the West.
Which made keeping tabs on the movement of that army a top priority for Western intelligence agencies. Given the sensitivity of the operation, the utmost secrecy was baked in from its very inception.
Berlin Tunnel was an amazingly close-hold operation, so very few people at the CIA knew anything about this operation. And the plan is to do this in conjunction. The United States had the money and they had the resources to finance an operation like this, and the British had the expertise. So, same way as with the CIA, almost no one at SIS knows anything about this operation.
Meet our guide for one of the most audacious acts of espionage carried out in the 20th century.
I'm Steve Vogel. I'm a journalist and author. Wrote for the Washington Post for a number of years, covering mostly military subjects, and I've written several books on military and intelligence history.
To the mission then. Let's build a tunnel.
The CIA needs to bring in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to dig this tunnel, because this is not something that the CIA can do on its own. And so a secret team is assembled and trained. They train out in the American West, and they create the equipment and special tunnel material that they're going to need for this operation.
All of which will need to be transported to Berlin by way of ship and train.
Which involves crossing through East Germany, and that is in itself quite a feat. That they box it up to look like normal industrial type goods, and they have to undergo Soviet inspection at the border, but it all gets through.
Still more challenging would be putting that equipment to use and digging a quarter-mile-long tunnel below the streets of perhaps the most closely watched city in the entire world.
The excavation itself involves removing an enormous amount of soil. And this being dug from the west side, in the American sector, across to the Soviet side, the place that they had chosen to build this tunnel was where the Soviet communication lines came closest to the American sector. But it was mostly a part of Berlin that was pretty undeveloped, some small villages down there, mostly farmland, and with the Soviets having a very clear vision.
All of this is taking place before the Berlin Wall has been built. Great for ease of movement, terrible for privacy.
It's a divided city, but there's no wall. So they would have to do something with all this soil that they're digging, and the idea they come up with is to build a warehouse above the hole on the American side, and they would just store all the soil in there.
Which solves the material disposal problem. But still, the construction team would need to tread extremely lightly.
They can't use any kind of a heavy equipment to dig this because the Soviets would hear the noise. So it has to be hand dug by teams of Army Corps who are, working 24 hours a day. They could fit about 6 or 8 of them in at a time, and they're using little shovels to dig, and then they build a little tiny railroad down at the bottom of this tunnel that they can load sandbags and haul the soil back to the warehouse.
Bag by painstaking bag, the Berlin Tunnel was converted from espionage fantasy to Cold War reality.
This operation was enormous in its scale, and it took about 6 or 8 months to finish the digging.
And yet, even with the completion of the tunnel, the hardest work was still to come.
The tunnel that the Army Corps of Engineers has dug goes underneath the street where the cables are running. But it's up to the British to dig a shaft that gets up to the cables themselves, which are only 27 inches under the road. So very close to where Russian soldiers are walking and patrolling, but they devise special equipment so they can do this, and it's being done in total quiet, because if you drop a wrench or something like that, it's going to make a clanging sound that could easily be heard up above. But they managed to pull it off.
In near silence, the British construct a chamber that provides them direct access to 3 trunk lines that carry vast swathes of Soviet communications.
And the tapping itself was just, a masterpiece of tapping work, because they had to do it in such a way that the Soviets wouldn't notice any change in the current on these lines. And that's the sort of thing that they could pick up pretty easily. And, each one of these cables, this isn't like tapping into a telephone line in an office. Each one of these cables is carrying hundreds of circuits. So it's very intricate, but the British team pulls it off, and they're able to tap the first of these 3 cables in May of 1955.
Back in the warehouse, at the other end of the tunnel, an army of intelligence workers sit at the ready.
They've created this huge listening room with 150 Ampex recorders that can record all these conversations, and they've assembled teams there of interpreters and technicians, and they're listening carefully with their headphones when the tap finally goes through. And the first telephone call they intercept involves a Red Army colonel speaking to one of his underlings, and at that point they've connected, they've succeeded.
After years of fiercely guarded planning, Operation Gold is live. However, after only a few months of operation, it was discovered by the Soviets. We say discovered. In reality, the KGB knew all about it from the start, thanks to double agent George Blake. When you have the time, go and listen to Steve's True Spies episode, Digging for Gold, to learn more about the tunnel, the fallout of its discovery, and about the man who brought it all crashing down.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
There are a lot of ways to obtain secrets. You could mount a huge logistical operation involving the collaboration of the UK and America's leading intelligence services over a number of years. Or you could dig through some trash.
We're not going to be able to bring charges yet, and we were getting a lot of pressure because all the resources we were using, we didn't have a case yet to go to trial.
It's February 2005. The voice you're hearing is that of Jim Gaylord, FBI special agent and case lead on the Chi-Mac counter-espionage case. And he's running out of road. For the last year, Jim's team has been gathering intelligence on Chi. As an engineer at a company called Power Paragon, he's been responsible for leaking technology developed for the US Navy to the People's Republic of China. Over the last year, Chi, his brother Tai, his sister-in-law Fook, and his wife Rebecca have all been heavily surveilled. Restricted documents have been discovered in his house. Jim knows that Chi-Mac is guilty. He just can't find the evidence that those secrets are actually being sent to China. But they're about to find a lead in an unlikely place.
If it's a low-level case, you're not even sure if you're going to have the requisite indications to pursue it, you might just grab trash one night. Usually it's in the middle of the night. You might grab one bag and see where it goes. But in a case like Chi-Mac, where we knew it was going to be long-term, you have to make other arrangements, because you're going to get caught sooner or later doing that. So we actually had to approach the company, the trash collection company, and they introduced us to the driver who handled that neighborhood.
Jim paid the garbage truck driver directly to keep Chi and Rebecca's trash separate from the rest of their block and drive it out to an abandoned lot. There, it could be sifted through at leisure, although, all told, there was probably nothing leisurely about it.
There wasn't much recycling being done back then, so you had kitchen, foodstuffs, bathroom, paper trash all put together, and you had to go through this mess to find out what little nuggets you could. And you can imagine summer after week in Southern California, or on rainy days, trash can be as gross as you can imagine.
They did this for a long time.
They were fantastic because they'd been doing this for 11 months at this time.
And finally,
in February 2005, they're going through the trash and they find these tiny little pieces of paper torn up. Each of them is like the size of a dime, and they've got some Chinese writing on them. And it's spread out throughout the trash. They've got to go through the whole thing to find and collect all these little pieces. Once we get it back, we've got to dry it out. It's soaking wet, and just like an incomplete puzzle with some pieces missing, we sit down and put together what turns out to be 2 sheets of paper that have been torn up into tiny pieces.
After many laborious hours of jigsaw work, the agents hold in their hands 2 notes, both written in Chinese characters. They look like lists.
First list turns out to be a list of technologies, the handwritten one, a list of 9 things, 5 of which we know Chi-Mac has access to. So that list was exciting, but even better was the second one, because the technologies it mentioned, Chi-Mac had all of them and had all of them in his house. And even better, it gave instructions. It wasn't just a list.
Suddenly, everything made sense. These were shopping lists, written by one of Chi's Chinese handlers, and their contents matched up perfectly with the documents discovered in his family home. Now all Jim's team had to do was catch Chi in the act of delivering them. And for that story, you should tune in to both parts of Chasing Chi, Jim Gaylord's full interview with True Spies. A year sifting through a suspect's trash is dirty work, but it shows dogged perseverance, never giving up. Something our next protagonist personifies.
The wonderful thing about, so many wonderful things about Zoe's story, but one of them is that you can't keep a good woman down. And it's such a story of victory and triumph and laughs at the end. It's absolutely brilliant because ultimately she won out and she secured freedom for her nation as well.
This is Claire Mully, an author focusing on the female experience, mainly in the Second World War. In her True Spies episode, The Many Lives of Agent Zoe, she told the story of how Elżbieta Zawadzka, aka Agent Zoe, went on to become a formidable soldier of the Polish resistance. She was the only woman to parachute into occupied Poland during the entire war.
She could have left with the Polish armed forces. Many of the women did, but Zoe decided that she could most effectively serve her country by remaining inside Poland and helping to set up the fledgling Polish resistance.
For the purposes of this digest, we'll focus on one moment in Zoe's eventful life. One that involves so many examples of tradecraft, executed so excellently that we would be remiss not to include it. May 1942. On the western edge of Berlin, a smartly dressed woman walks purposefully along a grand avenue, occasionally exchanging greetings with the uniformed men she passes.
She is blonde and blue-eyed, so she not only speaks fluent German, she looks like a typical German.
This is Agent Zoe, fully inhabiting her German persona. No one bats an eye as she peels off the street and makes her way into the embassy of Manchuria, a Japanese puppet state in northern China. There, she's acknowledged with a nod and ushered into a small room. As she awaits the arrival of her contact, she retrieves a key from her purse.
And the shaft of the key, you can pull the end off, and it's got a pin down the middle, and they could wind the film around that pin and put the shaft of the key back on.
The woman unspools a length of microfilm and places it on the table. Soon, her contact arrives, carrying a parcel of his own.
She handed over her microfilm, and the contact at the embassy actually now gave her a massive block of notes, including a lot of American dollar notes as well, to give back to the resistance headquarters.
She looks at the man with ill-contained contempt. She had specifically requested the bills be pre-concealed for her journey back to Poland. There is no way she will be able to carry a brick of foreign currency across a fiercely guarded wartime border.
And the resistance in Poland are expecting her to get back within 24 hours. But instead of going straight back this time, she diverts. She takes a bit of a risk and goes to the apartment of an old friend in Berlin. And they stay up all night together. Her friend makes a kind of glue out of flour and water. They take the lining out of her old battered suitcase that she travels with, and they paste these dollar notes, all of these notes, into the lid of her suitcase.
The next morning, bleary-eyed, she heads to the train station, dragging her suitcase behind her, and boards a train bound for occupied Poland. She is 24 hours behind schedule.
As soon as she gets across the border into occupied Polish territory, she goes to stay with her sister Clara. Clara is her younger sister. Zoe's actually recruited Clara into the resistance as well, and she feels very responsible for her younger sister. So when she goes to stay with her, they have a little system for security. Zoe will throw a pebble up to a side window and Clara will twitch the curtain. They'll know everything's good.
By the time Zoe arrives at her sister's apartment building in the city of Sosnowiec, it is late afternoon. As usual, she picks up a pebble and aims it for the window on the second floor.
And nothing happens, and she immediately knows that something is wrong. So instead of calling at Clara's apartment, she goes to a neighbour, and the neighbour just opened a door a crack and hissed at her, "Get out, go, they've arrested Clara, and there's Gestapo waiting for you in her apartment."
Panic seizes Zoe by the throat.
And Zoe must have had this horrendous moment of standing there, knowing that her sister has been taken, is probably even then being brutally interrogated. But there is nothing she can do for her. And it's certainly not going to help Clara if Zoe is just arrested as well. So she turns on her heel.
As quietly as she can, Zoe creeps back down the stairs, and out of the building. She manages to make it to the apartment of a friend a few streets away. There, she learns that much of her resistance network has been compromised, and that the Gestapo will no doubt be hunting for her too. I wish I could tell you that the end of the war, when it finally came, meant the end of Zoe's tribulations. Perhaps that would be the case in the Hollywood version of her life, but reality seldom resembles the movies.
In the West, quite recently we celebrated VE Day and then VJ Day. We think of all those people dancing, doing the Congo, bunting, Churchill waving, the royal family, celebrating peace and freedom. But in Poland, of course, they're left just with peace. They are not left with freedom. They are left with a Soviet-imposed communist regime. And although Zoe was never arrested during the war, never caught, in 1952, she was arrested by the Polish communist government, and she was actually sentenced to prison for 10 years on trumped-up charges. And she was tortured brutally while she was in prison, but she never betrayed her wartime colleagues.
Throughout the many lives of Agent Zoe, there was one constant: bravery. Bravery is almost a given in this line of work. It's what makes it possible for an agent to carry out their tradecraft successfully, to get the information they need, and crucially, to stay alive. I'm Rhiannon Neads. Tune in next time for another rendezvous with True Spy's brightest and best.